So with that introduction, let's dig into principle number 1, the belief in the existence of God. I believe with complete faith that the Creator, may His name be blessed, Hu Borei, He's the Creator, Umanhid, He oversees, He supervises, L'chol habruim, to everything that was created. V'hu levado, and He alone, Asa, made, Oseh, makes, V'ya'aseh, and will make, L'chol hama'asim, to all those things that are made. In a nutshell, the idea of the first principle is to believe that God created, but not just God created went away. God created and continues to create. God created and oversees. Everything that has been created was created by God. Everything that continually exists only and insofar as God wills it to exist. In the full text of the Rambam, from his commentary Mishnah, we read some more details about this principle. He tells us to believe in the existence of the Creator, and that is that there is an existence, there is an entity who is perfect, who is complete in all manners of existence. He is the cause of the existence of all things that exist. Meaning that there's like two things. There is God, and then there's everything else that's not God. God, says the Rambam in this principle, is the cause of everything else that is not God. It means everything else is to a creation. Angels, creation. Heavens and earth, creation. Galaxies, creations. Humans, creations. Amoebas, creations. Bacteria, creation. Everything besides for God is a creation, and God created all those things. Moreover, continues the Rambam, the existence of everything else that was created is only as a result of God sustaining them, which is an important point. It's not feasible by this definition for God to create the world and then to move on to bigger and greater things. Because the second a creation is severed from its creator, the creation ceases to exist. The creation only exists so long as God continually wills it to continually exist. We say this every morning in the prayer. God in His goodness renews every single day ma'aseh bereshis, the handiwork of creation. When did creation happen? We would say, according to the Torah, 5,779 years ago, plus 6 days. That's when creation started to happen. But really, that's when it happened the first time. But it happens again today, it happens again yesterday, it happens again tomorrow. It continually happens because for something to exist, it has to be recreated anew every second, or else the second God withdraws His creative force from it, it ceases to exist. Just as an aside, there is a principle in Jewish philosophy called kfitzat haderech, which literally means leaping or jumping along the way. So if you want to travel from here to Virginia, you got to travel the whole way, kind of manually. But if you have kfitzat haderech, you can leap the way. You get there much faster. So, for example, we're told in Genesis, Rashi tells us that when Jacob traveled, he had kfitzat haderech. He leapt away. It happened much faster. Kind of an interesting idea that the righteous people, they have accelerated travel. They take the high occupancy vehicle lane. They have the fast track. That's the idea. What does that mean? On a theological level, this is what it means. God creates everything. Not just created everything, but creates everything and continually creates them. Meaning that I don't exist at all as an independent entity outside of God. God chose to create me and chose to create me again, and even though I was created 5 seconds ago sitting on this chair, I was also created right now sitting on this chair. But it could have been just as easy for God to create me, not in this chair, but in a chair in my house. And then I would just poof disappear and you guys would wonder where I am. But it's just the most common practice of God is to continually create someone in the place where they were a second ago, which is why we're stationary. Because God created me again sitting over here. For the righteous, God sometimes does miracles. It's not difficult for God to do a miracle, it's just difficult for us to process it because we're not used to it. God creates Jacob in one place, the next millisecond creates him in a different place. So he leapt. He jumped from one place to another, not because he knocked out all the people along the way, but rather because he leapt, so to speak. He existed here, then he existed there, and there was no time in between for that journey to take place. That's this idea. God created us, God continually creates us, and God sustains us. If God withdraws his force, his vitality that he's giving us, we cease existing immediately. Moreover, continues the Rambam, and this is another analog of this idea. Everything is dependent upon God, but God is independent, is not dependent upon anything else. Meaning, explains the Rambam, should we consider and conceive an existence where God would not exist, by definition, nothing else would exist, because everything else exists only so far as God wills it to exist. Whereas, should we cease existing, God would still exist, because his existence is not dependent on our existence, but our existence is dependent on his existence. And therefore, as a result, God is independent. So Hashem is echad, he's one, he's independent. He has unity, he has mastery, he's the true existence, because every other existence is only relative existence. It's only existence insofar as God wants it to exist. It doesn't stand on its own. Only God stands, so to speak, on his own. He doesn't need anything else. When we say God's perfect, God lacks nothing, this is what it means. Everything else that exists only exists for the sake of those things, not for God, because God can be independent of those things. We're dependent, he is independent, and the Rambam concludes, everything besides for him, including the angels and the galaxies, what's in them, what's below them, what's above them, all that need him for his existence, and he does not need them for existence. That's the conclusion of the first principle. And this, the first principle, as is indicated in the text, I am the Lord your God who took you out of the land of Egypt. So that's the Rambam's formulation of the first principle. The knowledge, the acknowledgement of the existence of the Creator who created, sustains, supervises, oversees, is independent, is not subject to us. We're dependent upon him, he's not dependent on us. Everything that exists, existed because he willed it to exist, and he continually wills it to continually exist. It's been pointed out that in Jewish literature, there is an idea called kofer be'ikr, which means someone who repudiates the principle. And the Rambam himself writes, when he elucidates this first principle, he says that someone who does not believe in this first principle is kofer be'ikr, is someone who repudiates the principle, for this is the true principle upon which everything else hinges. Meaning that when we talk about 13 principles, when we talk about 13 principles, they are 13 dimensions of this first principle. Really, this is the only principle. There's only one principle, it's this one. Everything else is a subset of this principle. As an example, this is a little bit clever. The Hebrew word for one is echad. The gematria of the word echad, meaning the numerical value of the word echad, the aleph is 1, the chet is 8, the daled is 4. What is 8 plus 4 plus 1? Of course, the answer is 13. The 13 principles of faith are all there to comprise the one principle that really towers above them all, and that is the existence of God. Moreover, we talk about God, of course, that covers the first five that directly orient around what our definition of God is, but God and God's Torah are inseparable. And there's a very famous line that we say from the Zohar that Kutchu Brichu Ve'araisa, God and the Torah, is Chad, who is one. It's the same thing. They're indivisible from each other. And therefore, that's all, again, those next four are part of that same original principle. And finally, when we talk about us and our existence is dependent upon how much we are cleaved, how much we cling to God. And therefore, reward and punishment is a natural extension of this principle. Because if someone is divorced or severed from God, then as a result, they cease having existence. And reward and punishment is a reflection of how much existence someone has. And the more someone's connected to God, which is the only thing that really exists, the more existence they have by extension. And that's reward. Whereas punishment is severing from God, because God is the only thing which has existence, and therefore by the degree that someone is severed from God, that's the degree that they don't have existence, and that is punishment. Thus, in effect, all 13 principles can really fit in to this one idea. I want to conclude our initial discussions on this first principle with one question that we'll try to answer today and one question that we'll have to leave for next time. The question that I want to answer today is the question of faith versus knowledge. This principle, are we obligated to understand it logically? Is it an article of logic or an article of faith? Must we stop thinking critically to fulfill this principle or not? It's an interesting question. So if you look at the Hebrew translation of the Rambam's 13 principles, he says, Sheyamin. A person has to believe. Ani ma'amin. I believe. However, if you look at the Rambam's corresponding work, the Mishnah Torah, and the beginning of Mishnah Torah, he starts with Yisoda Yisodos Vamuda Chachma Sheyeda Ha'adam. A person has to know, has to have knowledge. Is it knowledge? Is it belief? Or is it someplace in between? The Rambam does add that Abraham was able to discover evidence for the existence of God. And the Rambam also encourages us to pursue evidence to discover the existence of God. Moreover, there's a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos that tells us that da mashe tashiv lapikoros, you have to know how to respond to a heretic, which seems like even a level beyond knowledge. There's faith, belief, knowledge, and then knowledge with sufficient strength to be able to thwart the arguments of the heretic. It seems like it's even another level. So which one is it? I want to dig into this subject. The Rambam himself writes that there's different levels of faith. There's a level of faith based upon tradition, which means their parents who don't lie to them, told them this is the way it was, and therefore they believe it, and they don't live on a very sophisticated plateau. They're not asking so many questions, they're not thinking about so many things, and they just believe based upon tradition. So that's a good thing and a bad thing. It's a good thing because, well, they believe. It's a bad thing because, well, what happens when they're confronted with questions? Or what happens when they meet heretics? It's quite likely that the heretic may triumph over them because the heretic did spend time honing their heresy, whereas the other guy didn't spend time honing his faith. And therefore it's a little brittle, it's fragile. It could potentially be upended. Is that sufficient? So the Rambam says that, listen, it is a certain degree, it is a certain level of confidence that is good, but it's really not good enough. Really what we need to do is to have knowledge, and maybe even sufficient knowledge to be able to one-up a potential heretic who has a debate with us. Now, it's also important to stress, the Mishnah does not tell us that we have to actually engage in debate. We just have to be armed with the ability to triumph in the debate should a debate be forced upon us. But we don't necessarily like looking for debate because it's usually fruitless, it's futile, because the person who's a heretic, that's what it says on their business card. I'm a heretic, heresy, Inc. And therefore, they're entrenched in their position no matter how much evidence you bring. And it's very rare to see someone have the strength of character and resolve to be able to turn away from the ways of heresy of their past. It's very rare to meet someone like that. So what are you going to gain by trying to talk to them? And in fact, the Talmud actually rules in the book of Sanhedrin, page 38b, that it is prohibited to debate a Jewish heretic, but it is permitted to debate a non-Jewish heretic. Why? Commentaries explain, because what's going to be? You have a Jewish heretic, they think they're a heretic, and now they're debating you. You win the argument, let's say, based upon impartial. The impartial vote is that you won. But so what? Do they get up at the end of the debate? You know what? You're right. I give in. Of course not. People don't do that. Maybe a few people do it, but it's very rare. So in effect, when you're debating with the Jewish heretic, all you're doing is further entrenching them in the ways of heresy. You think you're doing something good, but really you're doing something bad. And therefore, it's dicey territory, and don't go there. But the bottom line here that I want to stress is that this really demands upon us to develop for ourselves a way of understanding this not only emotionally, not only the way we feel, but the way we think, and the way that we can really even defend logically. And I think this could be scary, because the way these things are presented to us is in very much philosophical terms. And the reason why it's presented in philosophical terms, the reason why these debates are for very advanced theologians and not for common folk, is because the only way to reject the idea of an intelligent creator is if you obfuscate, if you confuse, if you make things complicated, if you speak in words that people don't understand, if you kind of raise it to a very, very theoretical level, and that's the only way you could justify your claim. And therefore, ironically, the more complicated you get, the more likely you are to think, A, that you have all the answers, and to not realize things that are obvious. And things that are obvious are the ones that all point you to the existence of God in a way that's really irrefutable. And asking the simple questions and probing on the simple planes of thought, that's what's going to lead you to God, not the philosophy. It's almost as if we could say that the philosophy is created, or at least the theological philosophy is created as a way to allow the heretics to continue existing. Because if they just asked the simple questions, if they just focused on the reality in a simple way, in a logical way, without getting too complicated, then it's evident to all, and it's undeniable, really, to someone who's thinking critically and logically, that of course our world had an intelligent creator. Of course. And by doing that, of course, that extends to the fact there must be purpose in the world, and the fact there must be Torah, because God must communicate what he wants from us. There must be things which are good and things which are not good. And there must, all those things kind of fall into place, all those dominoes fall into place once you accept this thing which is so simple. But still, even though it's so simple, everyone should really be responsible to develop and hone and clarify for themselves whatever it is that gives them that confidence that they could be in the category, not just people who believe because of faith, because of tradition, but people who believe because of knowledge. So I could say just a simple question, and this is the question the Rambam talks about. Did the world create itself? Did the galaxies create themselves? It's such a simple question. It's a 4-word question. Can something create itself? Of course not. So therefore, there has to be someone who created it. So when we see something, we know a creator. It's very simple. It seems even elementary. And we're trained to say, no, you gotta complicate it. You gotta talk about first cause, and if you don't, not talking about Kant or Descartes or some sort of great philosopher, it's not a real conversation. No, we have the Rambam who towers over them all. Simple. Did matter create itself? Of course not. So then who created matter? There must be a creator. There must be a creator who's not created, because everything that is created has a creator. Simple questions. But what about evolution? Well, even what about evolution? So what? Evolution, first of all, is not talking about who ran it. Evolution is a process. So it's possible that God used evolution to create the world, to create species. Maybe yes, maybe no. Maybe he created it all the way it is. We don't know. We don't have a say of how God. We have no position. You asked us, what's the Jewish position on what methods that God used to create the world? The answer is we don't know. We have 31 verses in Genesis. We know who created the world. We don't know exactly how he did it. We could say, well, he used the earth for man. Sure, fine. But how God created the world, we don't know. You look at the Ramban, he said that God on day one created matter, created energy, created the building blocks that he formed into everything else. But again, we're not told the specific process. It's possible evolution is true, just so long as you say that God manipulated it. But people are not usually happy with that. And then you say, okay, well, who created the first amoeba? Evolution starts with a very, very complex thing. It starts with a nuclear bomb. That's what it starts with. And even then, it's so irrational to suggest that a mouse magically turns into an elephant. It's so crazy. But the intelligentsia, they say that we're crazy. They say that, no, you guys haven't figured it out. You're not sophisticated enough. Simple. How does a mouse turn into an elephant without anyone manipulating that? Oh, the zebra stretched its neck out and turned into a giraffe. It sounds childish when you simplify it. It's childish. But the complication was created as a way to create murkiness, to create a smoke screen, to create doubt. And that is the tools of the heretic. I'm not saying that we can't think critically, we can't think on a deep level. But I'm saying over here, it's important for you to be as real and as logical as possible and not escaping to things that you don't understand. So, for example, the Talmud says this. This is the words of the Talmud, and therefore we could very much present it here. The Talmud says a statement that we know is unambiguously true. The Talmud says that if you take all the intellect of all the people in the world, moreover, if you take all the people that have ever existed, all that combined intelligence, incredible amount of intelligence, it could create skyscrapers and jet turbines and internet, all kinds of cool things. But let's say we want to create just one mosquito, one fruit fly. That's it. The most lowly of all creatures. Again, there's 1 trillion species on this planet. Just one fruit fly, one mosquito. That's the Talmud. You combine all the wisdom, all the ingenuity, all the engineering of all of humanity, you can't do it. You can't. So who in their right mind would say that this wasn't created, it happened accidentally? If you can't create it willfully, with intent, with intellect, with tools, whatever it is, you can't do it. How do you suggest that it happened on its own? It's so asinine in my eyes. But that's not just a fruit fly. It's everything. 1 trillion different fruit flies, all of them different, all of them able to reproduce perfectly. It's an incredible thing, though. It's so obvious to all that there is an intelligent design, yet people resist it. And we understand, the reason why they're resisting it is because there's all kinds of implications. Once you believe in intelligent design, it's scary, someone's watching my behavior, I might have to give an accounting for it, I'll have to be one of those weird religious people. There's all kinds of things that people are scared of, but the logic is very sound. We live in a world that's organized to perfection. And so whoever wants to escape to Mars, they don't realize the second they get to Mars, they're going to die on the spot, because it's a world uniquely unsuited for human habitation or for any kind of habitation. And yet we're here. Everything's so perfect. Everything works so beautifully, and all we like to do is complain. There's too much pollution. There's too much CO2 in the environment. All kinds of problems that we have. The things aren't good enough, where everything is just so beautiful, so perfect, so tailored, so designed for us, yet we resist it. And again, the answer is that the God is hidden in the world. All you got to do is scrape away at the surface, but you have to do some work to scrape at the surface. At Sinai, it was undeniable. No one at Sinai said, no, I don't believe. Everyone believed. It was undeniable. Yet, before Sinai, so to speak, the existence of God was undeniable, but there was some work you needed to do to understand it. And that's what we have to do to bolster our existing faith, is to deepen our understanding of this principle, to upgrade from people who have belief to people who have knowledge. And everyone should find for themselves whatever angle works for them. There's a lot of different angles to pursue, but the point is it should be yours. Don't be puppeting around what other people told you. Say what you think is true, what you think makes sense, what you think is logical, because if you use that process, you're going to invariably end up at the truth. What I want to say for next time is the following question. And this is a very advanced question, but it seems like it results from the Rambam's principle, from this principle. And the question is, does creation contradict perfection? Rambam tells us that there is an existence called God, which is perfect, lacks nothing, is totally independent, needs nothing. Well, what do we see? We see a world. We see humans. We see animals. We see angels. We see galaxies. We see all kinds of things that are not God. God does not need them, tells the Rambam. Yet, God created and continually creates them. How do those things coexist? If God needs nothing, God lacks nothing, God totally perfect, what would, so to speak, motivate him to act and to create and to bring about all these other things that are not God? Does creation contradict perfection? That's going to be the subject of our next session, when we try to understand more about what the implications are, not just the ideals. What are the implications of this first principle, and what are the questions that maybe we could ponder as a result of these principles and how they are laid out so beautifully by the Rambam. Okay, so I guess we'll stop here. We'll take any questions.